Ryan, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So Ryan, Flexport is a massive logistics company, and you've really raised awareness about all of the supply chain challenges and what you see as solutions for them. And about a year ago, you were looking most specifically at the Port of Los Angeles and some of the problems there. Have the logistics challenges gotten any better this key holiday shipping season?
Yeah, we've seen a huge improvement both at the ports in terms of congestion. The number of ships waiting offshore is really improved. And I think most importantly for the companies that are shipping goods, the prices have come way down, where prices of shipping a container from Asia to the US are down about 80%. So that's really happy news for any company that's sourcing overseas and ultimately for consumers buying those goods.
So what is the source of that progress? How much of this is because you got out there a year ago and said, we have backlogs, we have problems, here are some solutions?
No, I don't want to take credit personally. I mean, it's a really complex ecosystem, like a lot of different problems, a lot of different places where it broke down. Fundamentally, it's about supply and demand for shipping containers around the world, and demand has come way down. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's like people have started to go out more, travel, go to restaurants, meet in person, go to conferences, and they only have so much money to spend. They're spending less on goods. There's less goods being shipped, and there's less demand. So some of the backlogs have eased.
And the whole thesis of Flexport is that you're helping your customers move things more efficiently. Sort of walk through the kind of progress your customers have seen in the past year.
Yeah, so what Flexport does, we're a technology platform for global logistics. We give people more visibility and control over their inventory while it's traveling around the world. Give you a platform to place orders to your factories and then convert those orders into shipments, which get delivered. We give you a lot more agility, a lot more flexibility, knowing where your goods are, when they're going to arrive. Data-driven control over this process so that if there's a problem, you can rapidly reroute containers, reroute shipments, and fundamentally get people better pricing, more visibility. What's happened with customers is, well, they're really celebrating these lower prices that have come through. People were pretty upset. With Flexport too, but with the entire industry. I mean, nobody wants, when it was taking 120 days to deliver goods from a port in China to here in Oakland, like, that doesn't make any sense. It's only 15 days at sea.
Yeah, I mean, that's a crazy number.
At the same time, the price went through the roof, like 10x increase in price. So nobody was really happy over the last year, and there's been a bit of musical chairs in the industry as everybody kind of moves around. We've been fortunate our customers have mostly stuck with us because of the benefits that we give them through data, through visibility, the ability to have control. But it's been a tough time. We've had to show our customers we're fighting for them.
Yeah, that seems like, I mean, the numbers are so crazy in terms of how much longer it's taking things to get around than it should have. But one of the things that it seems like we're seeing now is that retailers are over-ordering because they're afraid of not having enough inventory, which was the problem last year. Are you seeing retailers make that kind of mistake, and can you help them with that?
We are seeing that. I think Nassim Taleb said, I've seen gluts that didn't lead to a shortage, but I've never seen a shortage that didn't lead to a glut. And so we've had shortages of all these things over the last couple of years, and now all of a sudden there's a glut. There's too much inventory. People are trying to figure out, hey, you know, as consumer behavior shifts so rapidly, last year's ordering pattern doesn't look like this year's. Maybe you got too many of those products, too many home fitness equipment, too much stuff for your staying at home type of living style that doesn't apply anymore. And so you're seeing a lot of this. You still have some shortages as consumer behavior shifts to new, experiences, services, et cetera. But that is definitely hurt customers. One thing that we do is give you better transit times. Know when stuff is going to arrive, help you to predict where are these shortages, where are these bottlenecks in your own inventory system, and then how do we route around that? How do we get inventory, prioritize the SKUs, the goods that are most important for you to be ready for holiday season right around the corner.
And it's all about that data. Now, last year, the holiday season was really defined by these supply chain crises, and unlike anything that anyone had ever seen before. But looking at this year and at future years, what do you think has been learned from the crisis of last year? Not just from Flexport, but what do you think the whole industry has learned?
I don't know that we've learned that much as an industry. I think, these are the cyclical industry. We, for example, there was not enough capacity of ships in the world. They ordered a lot of ships. Now we probably had too many ships. So I don't know. And that's something that, we should have learned the last cycle was 5-10 years ago when this happened before. Not exactly like this. We've never seen the exact circumstances, but there have been times in 2016 when there was excess capacity, and we're right back there when we thought we would never be there.
So what does the whole logistics industry, what does every company that ships things around the world need to know now to prevent future crises?
I mean, I think the key is understanding data flows, and it's an end-to-end system, meaning the container liners, the people that run these ships out here, their ship goes from port to port, but the goods need to go door to door. And ultimately, you're talking about the data flow of that purchase order that's going from an importer all the way to the factory, and then converting that to a shipment and delivering it across multiple modes, a truck, there's a warehouse, a port, then a ship or an airplane, and mirror image on the other side. It needs to be delivered end to end. And how do you get visibility on that whole flow so you can make decisions? So you have seen a lot of ocean carriers, the people that own ships, start to buy trucking companies, start to buy warehousing companies, try to get a handle on it. Our belief at Flexport is better to take a technology-first approach to provide data and tools to all those players rather than needing to own the assets. Owning the assets is, well, it's expensive, it's hard to get the return on capital you want, and fundamentally, it's a difficult business that we don't want to be in.
And then in terms of the challenges at the ports themselves, the Biden infrastructure bill had $17 billion for ports modernization. What role do you think that will play in fixing these challenges?
I don't understand enough about how Washington works to see how that $17 billion will trickle down here to the Port of Oakland. It'll be really interesting to watch in a domain that I am familiar with, to see how Washington interfaces with it. But just over the horizon, just over here outside the camera shot, we have an empty port terminal that's not been used for the last 3 years. Needs some CapEx. So that's the one I'll be watching to see, we got $17 billion. Do they upgrade the port terminal and bring it back into service? It wouldn't be that hard to do. And so that's a very good litmus test to see, does this thing do any good?
Yeah, we'll have to watch. Next time we'll have to be over there at that port terminal. Now, one thing I think is really interesting about Flexport is this idea that in your success, you are helping your customers not only save money, but also reduce their carbon emissions. Talk about this idea of using supply chain technology to have a positive environmental impact.
Yeah, well, supply chains are a huge source of emissions for the world. It's something like 7% of world emissions. I forget the exact statistics, but it's larger than the country of Germany, for example. It's a very big number coming out of just from the ocean freight sector alone, to say nothing of producing all of the goods around the world and everything that goes into it. So it's a big challenge, and it's a fundamentally hard physics challenge. We don't have a better way to power ships. I don't consider the age of sail and going back to that to be progress. We want to get a zero carbon emissions. That's probably the only technology we have right now is sailboats. Doesn't feel like progress, but there are things that can be done right away. So for example, we see that on average, we shipped about 500,000 shipping containers last year on our platform. On average, they were only 70% full. So you've got 30% of extra space inside these containers that if we can use data to better optimize the packing of containers, you can reduce emissions quite a bit by reducing the number of containers that need to get shipped. Similarly, choosing better routing or converting air freight onto ocean freight. There are many ways that you can take action, even if you're not fundamentally solving the physics problem, which is hard, and I'm not qualified to do it, but we do need really smart people working on advanced designs for energy systems that can power these ships, electrical and other. And
so it sounds like that sort of environmental impact will be a key part of the business going forward.
Yeah, it's a big part of what we do, and Flexport.org is our group that has a dual mandate. One is emissions reductions and mitigation and offsetting, and two is humanitarian relief logistics, helping with disaster response.
And your humanitarian relief work has really come into play this past year with your work in Ukraine. Tell us about how you're deploying these same tech platforms that are using for shipping these goods around the world to help in situations like the war in Ukraine.
So one of the things that I learned that shocked me at the outset, once we started getting started with Flexport.org doing humanitarian relief, is that 60% of all of the goods that are shipped in response to a natural disaster or humanitarian crisis, 60% of those goods end up in the landfill. Wrong goods sent to the wrong place, nobody's there to receive them. And that would be okay if we're just like, hey, it's a crisis, send as much stuff as possible. If we waste some stuff, that's okay. I mean, that's a reasonable approach. The problem is that all these goods end up clogging supply chains. They end up confusing the people on the ground. They're unloading. They've got unmarked cardboard boxes. They don't know what it is. It's a huge amount of waste. It actually creates it means that less goods reach the people that need them. And so we have a very simple model with Flexport.org that inverts this. We partner with the best nonprofits, aid agencies, and governments that are doing on-the-ground response, distribution, needs assessment and distribution in these crisis areas. Say that they know, here's what we need. These are the goods that we need. We can then turn to corporate partners and other nonprofits and say, hey, do you have goods like this to donate? We will ensure that they are delivered directly to the people in need. They will get distributed by reputable partners. And when you ask people to do that, they almost always say yes. And then we can turn to philanthropists who will pay for the shipping. And so it's just like a beautiful win-win. We last year partnered with Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher to raise almost, I think it was $35 million in the end, for funding goods to refugee camps from the Ukraine war. And there's just a really simple model where we're able to ship millions of kilos of relief goods with almost, we sort of have these superpowers, and it's empowered by our technology to make sure that the people on the other end are ready to receive the goods.
Now, unfortunately, there will always be disasters, whether it's a hurricane or a situation like what's happening in Ukraine. Do you see the ability to continue to scale your humanitarian work as the company grows?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really active right now in Florida, Hurricane Ian, and we're pretty much, there's always things happening, sadly.
Yeah.
And they're kind of unpredictable, and yet, we didn't know there was going to be a hurricane in Florida this year, but you knew there was going to be a hurricane in the United States at some point, and it would be big and cause problems. And you probably, on a cycle, can predict there'll be one in Florida too. So one thing we'd like to get better at as a company is really having these kind of playbooks already prepared, so we're not reactive after the fact when something like this happens, but you can sort of immediately go to, hey, we know what to do. Hurricane, what state is it in? Okay, let's activate the network. Here are the partners we're going to work with, et cetera. There will always be unpredictable things, but some of these are more predictable than you might assume. As Flexport grows, first of all, it becomes more profitable. We were profitable last year, and that helps. But as we grow, as we become more profitable, I think we'll be able to have a bigger impact. But as we get the word out that, hey, there's ways for other companies to get involved, for our customers to get involved, and I think many other types of philanthropies, et cetera, to participate and help us do this work. We'll see us do this for a long time to come.
Now, speaking of the future of Flexport, let's talk about your decision to take a step back from the CEO role. You made this announcement earlier this year. Now you transitioned from CEO to co-CEO. You brought on a very experienced partner for yourself from Amazon, and you're going to be stepping into an executive chairman role next year. This seems like a very thoughtful decision. What was behind it, and why did you decide to execute it over this longer time frame?
Yeah, so it was thoughtful, yes, but not necessarily premeditated. I was actually searching for a partner to run the operations of Flexport, and I'm a creative type. I really like the products. I really like the technology, but we're an operations company. We have to be the best, the highest quality, the best at delivering freight on time, in full, at a low price. Means we have to be efficient. And I didn't feel, I'm learning about this stuff, and I find it to be really intellectually stimulating, but I'm learning on the job. And so I wanted to find a partner who was just world-class in this. And I feel like I kind of caught a whale. I was out fishing, and then I found through a mutual friend that Dave Clark would be interested. And honestly, I didn't really think it was real at first. And so I started talking to Dave, and as I got to know him more, reflecting okay, which parts of the company would I run, and what would Dave run? And pretty soon I realized Dave would be better at running all the parts of the company than I would be. And yet I love being at Flexport. I'm not going to leave the company. I'm going to be his partner and be much more available to be free to go float and find ways to add value around the world. It's a big global round world, and often I'm in the lab with my team building stuff heads down, and I can't go attend that conference or meet with that investor, meet with that port CEO. And so I think we're going to find a really natural balance there, where Dave Clark, who ran all of operations for Amazon, was the CEO of Amazon Consumer, which is their retail business. He's ready, he can run the core day-to-day business much better than I ever could. and it frees me up to really kind of evangelize Flexport and represent us at the highest levels.
Interesting. You know, one thing we talk a lot about within the Disruptor 50 is about how to scale companies from startups, disruptive forces, to really part of the establishment. And part of that sometimes involves bringing in either partners or a new CEO. How do you see Dave Clark's leadership helping transition the company to the next level?
Yeah, a number of things. I think we're rapidly upgrading our leadership. We've hired a number of key people that he's worked with over the years. A lot of people from Amazon, but they're not necessarily Amazon people. They've worked all in many different companies, with Amazon being part of the journey. So we've hired a guy named Tim Collins, who used to run logistics and operations for him at Amazon, a woman named Darcy Henry, who ran HR for like 90% of the people at Amazon. So kind of upgrading, those are two areas that I felt right away. I told Dave, hey, we've got to get better at operations and HR, human resources, how we take care of our people and attract the best talent. So we've already made two big hires there. I think you'll see us make more on the technology side, kind of upgrade Flexport's ability to be, one of these enduring world-class companies. We've always said, like, global trade is probably the biggest industry in the world that hasn't been overturned by the internet. And if you can make a company that is the leading platform for global trade, you will be one of the biggest companies in the world. But I've never felt we were good enough to really get there, and so that's the challenge that I felt I needed to solve, and Dave's a big part of that.
And so do you think Dave will take the company public?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And what's the time frame?
Well, we don't know for certain. Right now we feel like we have a lot more to do to prove to ourselves before we're ready to go prove it to investors that we're ready to be a public company. So at the beginning of the year, just before Dave joined, we raised $935 million in a private round, led by Andreessen Horowitz, Founders Fund. Shopify was a big investor, as well as Michael Dell's family office. So we're well capitalized for now. We like being private, but for sure the long-term destiny of Flexport is to be a public company.
Yeah, it seems like despite the overall pullback in VC, logistics companies continue to draw funding.
Well, we were lucky to raise this money right before the capital markets all went sour, and the freight prices have started to come down. So our timing was good, but not necessarily lucky. We kind of knew those forces were out there and weren't going to last forever, and wanted to put some money on the balance sheet while we could.
And just a final question, with the macroeconomic uncertainty that we're seeing now with inflation and all these pressures, do you think that will push even more companies to adopt your technology?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the need to get visibility is clear for everybody right now. But you also need control. It's one thing to be able to see where your stuff is and where problems are, but then if you can't take action on it and solve the problem, your platform is not really working for you. And this is where I think Flexport's unique combination of being a technology company that also does real world operations. Like, we take responsibility for getting that freight delivered, making sure that your supply chain runs smoothly. That's a really unique value proposition that's really hard to replicate, because technology companies don't want to get their hands dirty. The port is a difficult place to operate. The world's ports we're in, we shipped freight to and from 112 countries last year. This is not simple, and building technology is really hard for the incumbents, for the companies that have been in the industry for centuries in some cases. It's really hard for them to become a technology company. So we think we have a really good advantage in both areas.
That's the force in being a disruptor.